What if your product demo wasn't just another step in your sales process, but instead was part of a decision engine that let your buyers sell themselves? See, it's a fact that AI is fundamentally changing the entire buyer's journey, and if you don't understand these changes and adapt, you're gonna get crushed. Luckily, I've got James Kaikis on the show today. He is the CRXO of Testbox, who is going to break down all of these changes and explain how you need to be thinking and building your go-to-market strategy in the era of AI. Let's get into it. James, welcome to the show, man. Thank you for being here.
Jason, it's great to be here. Thanks for having me. Super excited to be speaking with you today.
Yeah, I'm very excited to talk to you. And I think that let's just jump right into it. So You have said that traditional demos are broken, the entire process for doing that, right?
Absolutely.
So let's start off like that right there and tell us a little bit about why you feel that way and what's broken with the process of sales today.
Yeah. I love this question. I probably could talk for 40 minutes on this question. Let's take maybe a step back, right? Is that what happened in SaaS the last decade is that if you wanted to see someone's product, you had to request a demo, you had to talk to BDR, you had to talk to AE, maybe I talked to him a couple times. There was all this friction in the process just to see the product, right? And people have, after a decade of this, people are tired of being banted on all of their calls. They're tired of having to do a JEP, a joint execution plan, just to see a product. And now, buyer skepticism is at an all-time high. They say that, 29% of buyers actually trust salespeople, right? So if you think about that, there's a lot of layers and complexity in that. So people don't trust you. They want to see your product. And so I think we've seen a birth of what you would call the product tour space, where people are putting, product tours on the website so you can either get a demo or you can cruise around the product for yourself. Because I think the biggest thing, Jason, is expectations of buyers have changed. No longer can you create this long process that adds so much friction for them just to get in, because Salesforce will tell you that 88% of people buy based off the experience. So you could have the best product out there, but if you're delivering a subpar experience, you're not even getting in the room, right? You're not even getting in the door.
Why do software companies do it that way? Because the whole objective is to make it as the sales process as friction-free an experience as possible. And I'll go one step further because this has always bothered me about software companies.
Sure.
As a marketer, as a guy who's been online marketing for the last 15 years, every time I go to a software platform and I go to their website to look at what the product is, what I get are these janky, cartoony videos with these bubbles that show all the things you can do, and they don't show you the actual product. No. So why is it that this has been so long in coming of actually getting to a more friction-free experience?
Yeah, I would actually argue that your comment about like what's needed as a friction-free experience is actually fictitious, right? People actually built process around their internal structures, their internal organization. And I've got a saying that in the last 10 years of software, we lost sight of who matters. And that's actually the customer. So we've created all these processes and all these roles and all this friction internally to help justify our existence across the journey. And then what you've learned is like, brand marketing and showing what the best state is going to look like is actually what's going to inspire buyers. So as like a solutions engineering leader, my background too is used to always say, well, imagine that this looked like this, right? Imagine that this looked like this. And then you see screenshots, because the reality is like the end state of what you're going to get out when you implement that product is usually less desirable than what you see in those screenshots, what you see in those bubbles. And we've been taught to sell value. And while I agree with that, most of the time that's just been a mask for our products not being able to actually deliver value.
So how has Testbox revolutionized that? Because the old process is bupkis and that's the poor way to do it, which I 100% agree with.
Yeah.
Like what's the differentiator for Testbox?
Yeah, it's a great question. Testbox's main value prop is that we are using live product with synthetic data. And so what happens a lot of times, right? Like software companies build software for you as a consumer in your company to utilize and find value, not for their own team to be able to showcase a best-in-class version. Because if I showed you my production environment that's against PII, right? So most of these companies do mock-ups, they have really poor demo experiences, and they try to tell you a story, and they tell you this inspiring story, and when they're showing you on the screen doesn't match, right? So I always say, like, you're trying to make buyers go through multiple hoops because what they're seeing and what they're hearing aren't matching. So what Testbox is doing is essentially replicating a best-in-class environment or customer using synthetic data that's always up to date, it's always accurate. And so if you're a manufacturing company, you can, see a demo environment that's in a manufacturing use case, right? If you're Nike or Adidas, you want to see something that looks like you when you're getting a demo. You don't want to see a financial services example because you're asked to jump hoops. And when you ask to get jumped hoops, skepticism gets up, the trust, you want a POC, it elongates the process. And so all these trends are these proof points that are happening today that has just created this misalignment in sales.
So break this down for me at Barney style, because as a non-software developer, non-software guy,
yeah,
when I envision and go on the website and look at what you guys do, what I'm envisioning is kind of a container that any software company can come and put their product into in a real world situation. Then you take artificial data and can kind of customize that platform so that when they take it to the client, the prospective client, they're seeing kind of a real world mock-up that's custom developed for the type of person or company that they're going after. This is enterprise stuff, right?
Yeah, so that is how a lot of companies in this space are solving the problem. They call them product tours. They're a little bit more of the screenshots or their overlay or cloning functions that take your environment, make a copy, and essentially put it in a container. Testbox is actually the opposite way, is we take your infrastructure and we pump data into it using public APIs, private APIs, browser automation. So the actual data is inside of the actual product and is simulating and using simulated behavior. And that's just a little bit different, right? Because a lot of times the product tours and the overlays of the screenshots, they really make a lot of sense, but the buyer's not always convinced that, okay, great, you show me this best-in-class example, but it's not a real product. It's not real data. It's not live and up to date. So I need to put my hands on it. I need to get in a proof of concept, and then I need to be able to probably upload my own data into the product, right? And this is why sales processes are so long and people want to try before you buy, right? So our thesis is like, let's solve the core problem and put the data into the product. And then that person can get hands-on in what we created because it looks and feels and showcases enough of what their real life would look like as if they were a user of that product.
Why are you guys the first people to do this? I guess this seems obvious to me as kind of like a solution.
We are one of the only, at this stage, we are the only company that I know that's solving the problem this way because it's very, very hard. Companies will try to solve this internally on a build versus buy, right? I was a solutions engineering leader for a lot of my career. And so I had teams and organizations that would build these types of environments. But the problem, Jason, is that you can pump data in. It's really hard to simulate data. It's really hard to simulate the experience. So what ends up happening is these software companies have like data in the system, but their reports are blank because the reports are looking at data over a time period, right? Or dates are from 3 or 4 years ago, or names say test or demo, and it just doesn't necessarily match. And so, yeah, you can do a lot of this internally from like a one-time data upload, but it's a lot of the simulation. And so what's really interesting right now is, and this is where Testbox has really found a moat and differentiation, is when it comes to AI, all these companies are putting AI in their product. Well, that AI is answering questions based off an underlying data set. You can't fake an underlying data set, right? And so Testbox has a really great value proposition because we put the underlying data in. And so for us, companies like Gong or Outreach or Apollo are building these products with tons of AI. And if you go to ask the AI question, you can ask it anything that you want, and it will give you an answer because it's based off synthetic data of a real customer. And that is a massive differentiator right now.
So I guess that kind of leads into my next question is how has AI changed what is possible in that environment? Maybe just expand on what
Yeah.
you just said
Yeah.
and helping in scaling these more personalized demos.
Yeah. Um, there's a couple things here. So Testbox has been using AI and synthetic data since 2020. That's really where we started. And so let's use a customer like mParticle, for example. We have infrastructure that allows us to be able to create millions of lines of data to put into mParticle so that they have that data set as a CDP provider. And then we have our own, what's called, for simplicity's sake, agents and workflow agents that essentially simulate and move the data on a time series basis to showcase that simulation. And so what was typically done by humans by hand in Excel has been accelerated through AI. And then what's being utilized through agentic workflows is the simulation that a lot of people were doing by hand or paying teams in India or the Philippines to go and do this manual, tedious work. We can all do that with AI now.
Got it. So you're basically just eliminating a bunch of grunt work of populating and uploading simulated data into these environments, and the AI agents are able to take over. Is that because they're plugging into, is it just making the stuff up, or is it actually pulling some sort of data from somewhere? I'm assuming that the agent has to have something to go and retrieve, right?
Yeah. So we essentially, by the way, great questions, Jason. Like super impressed with the questions. You're asking all good questions because we build the data set, right? And we use AI to create the data set and the structure. The agents in the workflow know exactly where the data is and what the story is supposed to tell, right? So for example, like we have e-commerce company, Brevo. We're born in, they have e-commerce capabilities in their platform. Our system is transaction e-commerce things every 5 minutes. It knows where to go to what retail website, what objects to buy, and what to put in the cart, purchase them. And then the marketing automation system says, Testbox, agentic workflow just bought, pair of sneakers, send them this email, right? And it knows because we've built that best in class data story.
Wow, that's incredible.
It's pretty nuts.
Is this where everything is going? Well, let me ask a different question because I think this will be better. The role and responsibility of the sales rep, because I'm going to be honest with you. Like I said, I'm not a sales guy. I'm not a software guy. I had no idea before researching this episode that there was something in this world called a pre-sales rep.
Yep.
And before before Testbox, you started the pre-sales collective.
That's right.
I had to go do research on it because I'm like, this exists.
Yeah.
But I do know a lot about sales. And so what is the role of the sales rep or the pre-sales rep in some cases, based on this new technology and is it just as a middleman to sort of facilitate? Talk to me about that.
Yeah, so the pre-sales function, sales engineering, solutions consulting, is typically the technical role in the sale, right? It actually started in the on-prem days when you had a salesperson who was just kind of, taking you to golf and, signing autographs, right? And you needed some technical person to set up the mainframe type deal, right? Mm-hmm. And as SaaS came to true, they just said, hey, let's bring this role over. And it, in a lot of companies, plays a very vital role in being the trusted advisor, right? It's the trusted role of solutions. And so we're the storytellers, the use cases, really just like the customer-centric problem solver is how I've defined that role. Now, this is where I tend to go on a little bit of a soapbox here because the more research that I do and the more VCs that I talk to, the more innovators I talk to, they talk about the role of the rep changing. Because if this is a longer answer, so I'll take a couple pieces here. If I can now automate through AI my research, my presentations, my next steps, my actions, my CRM data, my forecasting, what is the role of the rep? Obviously, it's to build relationships, it's to build trust, it's to progress a sale, and obviously close net new revenue, but also make that person successful. And so when you ask about the solutions engineer or the pre-sales function, what we're starting to see in this profession is that solutions engineers that are typically not on a quota as much as a salesperson are now being converted into salespeople because they know the customer, they know the stories, they know the use cases. And what was typically the sales rep job of building pipeline and all the things that I just mentioned, you can use a lot of AI to support that, or you can use RevOps or go-to-market engineering. I think that's what's so interesting, Jason, is that if people don't trust sales reps, why don't they trust sales reps? It's typically because they don't have a point of view. They smell commission breath, and they can't actually deliver value. And so why not take the role and the function that's typically delivering value in the sales process and make them the seller and give them the tools, the systems to support them to build trust and to be a voice of the customer.
When you do that, do you have an issue with those guys? Because if the role of the sales rep, I guess, is kind of turning into more of an advisor or a curator and a support to the customers that are coming in, there's still some aspect of sales that has to be done, right? Absolutely. In order to make it. Do you find that when you remove the sales rep and you put the other guy in that place, that you run into problems because they can't really sell very well, and so they're great at helping to facilitate, but when it comes time to like really push the button, they're just incapable of doing that? Yeah.
So one of the things that I've done a lot of research on, right, is talking to CROs and VPs of sales to say, is it easier to take your current salespeople and train them to be technical, or take technical / business savvy solutions people and teach them to be better sellers? And the answer is almost always take the business savvy solutions engineers, because not all of them are extremely technical engineers. You have people like myself that are just business savvy, but also like very technical / curious, technically curious, and teaching them the sales skills. And if you think about the role of the frontline manager, the role of the frontline manager can come in more to the middle to the end of the sales process and help fix that. Because, I've worked at a lot of software companies, including Salesforce and plenty of medium to big stage companies. Frontline leaders typically come in and do a lot of the selling and become the super AE for their teams that have gaps in talent. And so if we think about like an org structure and like a function and what the roles and responsibilities can be, I think you can mitigate this a bit more with the frontline manager.
Got it. That makes sense to me. And you're absolutely right. I would hate to try and take a guy who is just a killer salesman and try and turn him into a technical expert, right?
It might not work, right? And Jason, to that point, right? It's like, I'm not here to say everyone's going to be a technical seller, but it depends on the product, depends on your ACVs, depends on your motion. And a lot of people will combat this and say, well, the enterprise, this doesn't apply in the enterprise. Yes and no, right? If you're an enterprise seller who you're good at utilizing your resources and, maybe you're not very trusted by your customers, you might be in a little bit more trouble, right? You've got to have a point of view. But I always find the best enterprise sellers, they have a point of view. They know how to build trust. They know how to build rapport. They know how to make the buyer feel like they're on their side of the table. And that's typically the gap, right? And to the question you asked earlier about salespeople being more consultative, that's what I've been hearing in my research, is that people were that professional sales is back. Consultative selling is back, because to win deals right now, you don't want it to feel like you're seeing across the table. You need to be on the same side, trying to advocate for these people, because buying is hard. Think about it. The Gartner research, is actually outdated right now, but it still says 17% of a buyer's time is spent with, the sales team. And that's all sales teams in the whole process, right? So you got to help them navigate the internal complexities, navigate, buying software, and then also advocate for them for your internal organization. Say, hey, this can be a great customer, great use case for us. They're going to do case studies. They're going to be on events for us. That is how you win in 2025, right?
No, I've been a huge advocate of consultative selling since I got into business. I just find that it should feel frictionless. When selling is done correctly, it's effortless. There's no friction there. It's a collaboration to get to a solution. And so I couldn't agree more with that. But can you show us something real simple, like it's something that you have AI sort of automated inside of the business to help the sales process along?
Absolutely. Before I get there, I want to make a comment that I've heard some people like you. I feel like right now people are all in on AI or they're super skeptical. And the reality is that I have, really, really dug in with people out there that are doing really amazing things. And actually, I'll call it Antonio Garcia Emotion because, like, man, I have learned so much from him. It's been unbelievable. And I have told people that I have become shook. I'm shook at the innovation that I have seen in the pace of innovation. And so the challenge I put on my plate and our organization's plate is, if you're a seller and you had no solutions engineering resource, no solution architecture resource, how would you do your job? And if you had no BDR, how would you do your job? And we have been innovating through AI. And so one of the things that I did want to show today is what we're doing for our calls with prospects. And so the outcome of this is that I essentially want to create that first call deck automatically based off who I book a meeting with. So that's this use case specifically. And I'll actually show you a draft version of a Pavilion, who's a community business that I'm involved with, what an output could look like. So when we book a meeting in HubSpot, it will go and find the contact in HubSpot. It will find the company. And then from there, we're using the AI to be able to find the company logo, search and look for API documentation. And then this is where things get very interesting for Testbox. We have crafted and prompted the AI to be able to understand our value proposition against the prospect that we're speaking with. And we have also defined all of the use cases for Testbox against our prospect. We craft all of this into a document, we create it into the record, and then we update HubSpot. Now, what happens next, Jason, has been a massive win for us, is that we actually create a presentation automatically and then send a Slack message to our reps to say, your presentation for your meeting with Pavilion is ready.
That's pretty cool. So if this is basically this is done in Zap for people who aren't familiar with it. I'm sure you all are. You'd have to be under a rock at this point to not know what Zapier is. But this is just a standard workflow, a process that the AI goes through. How do you deal with hallucinations? And is that just when you send it over to the rep and say, hey, here's your deck, they got to go through it and make sure and double check the work?
Yeah, it's a great question. We have spent a lot of time tightening up our prompts. So we had a V1 of this. You could actually see up here, this is V6/V5, right? Like, we've made many versions of tightening up the prompts to be able to get our output. So we've spent a lot of time testing and saying, okay, like, this is a current customer. If we use this against a current customer, what would the output be? And we started to sharpen it. And we've worked with people like Jordan Crawford of Blueprint GTM, who like really understands AI and prompt engineering and learned from his prompts, and people in the industry that have put out really great content to say, where do we need to tighten up our prompts? And we've used Claude and OpenAI and Gemini and cross-reference them to build the best prompts. And so that's where we're at right now. Now that will create a document, which I can show you a draft version of an outdated one that I created.
Yeah, let's take a look at it. I want to see what the quality of the draft of the presentation they put together.
Yeah, so this is like an old version of Testbox branding that I just ended up running for today. So as you saw, we pulled the logo, right? So it will pull the logo and place the logo into it. And then we've got 5 slides here, right?
Hang on, that's not showing on my screen.
Oh, excuse me. So
okay, gang, quick break to tell you about our sponsor for the show, Motion. Listen, if your calendar resembles a Jackson Pollock painting and you find yourself constantly falling behind schedule, you need to try Motion. It's the AI-powered super app that rebuilds your workday in real time. Motion pulls every task, every project, every meeting into one place and then prioritizes and time blocks your calendar so that you always know exactly what to tackle next. It's kind of like having a project manager and a personal assistant and, I don't know, an air traffic controller all rolled into one. And the results? Well, teams tend to finish work twice as fast with 90% fewer check-ins, emails, and meetings, which, let's face it, it's something we can all afford to avoid. And because Motion predicts delays before they happen, you can course correct in days instead of hours before a deadline. Now, I've swapped my patchwork of calendars, task apps, and sticky notes for Motion, and I have never been happier. So click the link in the description to try Motion for free today and start turning chaos into calm. Now, back to the show. There we go. Now I got it.
There we go. All right, here we go. So this is going to show the overview page. And as I mentioned, this is like an outdated slide deck, but wanted to bring this for an example. But you see that it pulled the logo, right?
Mm-hmm.
It pulled the logo of the person that we're going to speak to. And
How does it find? Just out of curiosity, I know this is like a junior question, but how does it find it?
we tend to use URL. So I
Okay.
think I will say that this has still been a little bit inconsistent for us. This part's been inconsistent, but when it goes to company name, it will go and look for the company URL and then go search on the internet for a logo. A lot of times, it's accurate, but this is where we have some inaccuracies where it might find a logo that was 1 or 2 versions old. So
Got it.
that's a really interesting call out. But I left this version as is, right? So what you end up seeing is Pavilion's value proposition. So again, for anyone who doesn't know Pavilion, it's an amazing professional development community, one that I'm involved in. I'm actually the functional lead for the CRO group. That's why I brought it in as an example. And so you see Pavilion's value prop. They don't have public API and developer documentation, so this obviously shows blank, but it shows their community overview. It shows core offerings and target market, unique selling points, competitive advantages, quantifiable impact and client success stories, and industry recognition and future outlook, right? And pretty interesting stuff, pretty accurate, if you know anything about Pavilion.
Mm-hmm.
So that's essentially the value prop that it lists. And then this is actually what gets interesting because we've thrown this in a couple of different places, is it will pull up a summary of like how Testbox would help Pavilion. So you see that it would help us build immersive, data-rich demo environments that reflect a live Pavilion's member experience. Today, they could really just show like their own member experience hub because that's not like PII from a software perspective.
Mm-hmm.
In some cases, you actually see systems to integrate, right? So it pulls like their member module, their learning management system, their network modules. It talks about the CRM and the analytics tools that they might need to be connected to for integrations, and then shows the use case as well. And then it talks about use cases with Testbox, right? Like, so what are 4 areas where Testbox could actually help them? You can see the simulating, the creating tailor, the demonstrating, the enablement. And then finally, it shows you a core benefits and scenarios, which I think is probably the most compelling. And this is kind of what we tend to show more on a point of view slide because we've got a couple versions of this. But this is like our value prop against what they have, what they do, and the scenarios in which it might be impactful. So think about this, Jason, right? This would probably have taken my rep hours to do, hours, and we automate it, right? And then we pair it with a document that we're running research on and deep research on the company and the people. So the reps walking into a meeting have their prep, they have a version of a deck available for them that they can go and customize and change, but we are now walking in with a point of view. And what I have found that we have done, and I'll pause here after a moment, is that we also do our own research and we try to talk to people in the field and like really learn. And so when you pair all this together, we talked about trust. I might do a disco with someone, Jason, for like the first 15 or 20 minutes. And I'll say, we also did our own research and I wanted to show you, what we came up with. And more times than not, it's actually more accurate and has more information than the prospect. I was talking to a big enterprise customer. I'll never forget. She went with an amazing disco, had a great conversation. We showed her our point of view document, right? And she said, wow, you nailed this and know more about our company than we do right now. She goes, this is entirely accurate. And that to me was the best feeling, that I could have as a sales team and a sales rep, because then the trust is there, right? It's like, okay, great. You did your homework. I respect that. You're not just showing up and throwing up. So again, this is just an example of something that we've done with AI that has saved our reps hours.
Yeah, and what I love about this is that it adds to what you were talking about, the collaborative process that you're taking people through, is that you're showing up and you've got this stuff together. What LLM or model did you use to train this? Is this like a prompt that's 3 pages long in order to get it to produce that for you, or is it something that anybody could put together relatively quickly?
Yeah, it's not that long. So if I were to show just a quick item real quick, is that we would essentially use ChatGPT 4.1 to build a lot of this. And for us, like we've used multiple different models, multiple different examples, and there's so much information out there. I mentioned Jordan earlier. I think that so many people are trying to be innovative in this moment and be on this new frontier. And so they're giving out content for free. And I think there's a lot out there on prompt engineering that comes to light. Now we've leaned in on GPT-4. I think we use a lot of Claude to actually build the prompts. But when we run the output, we have found that GPT gets us the best output. And one different answer to your question, Jason, is maybe this is the solutions leader in me. I'm a little bit psychotic about testing. So I'll run the same project 3 times, sometimes 4 times against the different systems to test the output, right? So like we've run this through everything and checked what the output was. Checked the output on a couple of different examples, fine-tuned, ran it again. Okay, we like this, we like this. And this is what I've learned from Antonio, right? Antonio blew my mind because he told me, did you know that Gemini 2.5 is really good with nonverbal cues? I was like, what? He goes, you can upload a video and it will give you the best response to nonverbal cues in a meeting. It's like, holy shit, like that's insane, right? So that's an example of like, okay, maybe you run it something else through a different model to get the output. And these models are improving and innovating and changing, which is actually, I think, the hardest part right now. But that's a big thing for us is how do we test everything? And then I'll even just go one step further is there's now a lot of companies that are trying to offer this out of the box. And so I'll test their out of the box solution versus our in-house solution and just compare it side by side to see like, do I build, do I buy?
Yeah, no, I think you hit the nail on the head. I think the hardest part right now is just how quickly things are evolving and how fast these models are changing. I mean, every time you turn around, Claude used to be the most superior at writing and speaking in your voice, but I find that whenever I'm doing that sort of stuff, that ChatGPT, just the regular 4.0 model, is producing stuff that I have a tough time telling whether it's me who created it or not. And so it's tricky. So have you guys encountered any problems inside the company as you tried to implement this stuff where, look, AI just isn't there yet, or the agents that they just don't have the capacity to do what we want them to do, and this is something that we still have to handle manually?
Okay, so I'll answer that in 2 ways. The first one is I always believe in human in the loop. I still, to this day, you can't convince me otherwise. You still have to have human in the loop. And I think this is where companies are failing right now because they're so reliant on AI and say, excuse me, they're so reliant on AI and they say, we don't need a human in the loop. Like the AI is accurate enough. Let's send this out. Well, Jason, you and I both know that the margin of error for AI companies is so slim. Like if you actually look at the studies of Waymo versus regular driving, obviously not as many miles on Waymo, but it is significantly safer. Yet if there's any bit of accident, we throw our hands in the air and say this is unacceptable, right? Like there's just, I like to tell people that if you asked me a question, ask the AI a question, I could lie to your face and you're sometimes more likely to believe me than the AI because I'm a human giving you that interaction. So that's one example. But actually, to answer your question as well, as brutally honest as this is and how much I hate to say it, the resistance to change from humans has been the hardest part. Like, I don't believe this. This isn't going to work. This doesn't make sense. This is not, I don't understand if I should actually do this. Like, this is part of my job. And what I've had to do as a leader is like, okay, let me prove that this is going to make your job easier. Because when I've rolled out a lot of stuff, right? I only just showed one and talked about a couple of things. My reps were like, I don't think this is going to help. Now they're like, this is the most amazing thing I've ever had happen to my job here at Testbox, right? So it's like, okay, seeing is believing, right? The proof, right? The proof is, and the value that it derives coming out of it has actually been the bigger part of all of this.
Yeah. Why do you think, because I hear this from business owners all the time, as well as employees inside the companies, is that there is this massive aversion still to AI. And when I try and pin it down, is it because, and I'm just asking the question, is it because people are scared that it's going to replace their job? Are they scared at trying to learn a new technology? Or are they scared because things seem to be moving so quickly and have advanced so far, so fast that jumping in now and trying to figure this out just seems far too overwhelming? Or I guess another option is that it could be that the technology just isn't there to make it easy.
Yeah.
right? You have to have some level of coding experience. You got to know how to
Sure.
use N8N or one of these other low code
Yeah.
software packages to make it work. What is, in your estimation, what is the aversion to do? Because everybody, every time you do it with
Yeah.
somebody, they go, "Oh, holy smokes! Like this is amazing."
Um, I want to answer and say all of those things that you mentioned, right? But I'll even take it a step back, right? If you look at like just OpenAI, Gemini, any of these AI prompting, we have seen faster adoption in less than 3 years than the internet saw in 10 years, right? So people are, my mom, my daughters, right? Like they use these types of technologies. So it's happening fast. Um, Again, it kind of pains me to say it, but I think people see it as an existential threat to their jobs and to their livelihood. And the reality is today, it's not going to replace our jobs. And I think there's an overused quote of you're not going to get replaced by AI, but you're going to get replaced by someone who knows how to use AI. I do think that that's the answer, right? Because there are businesses that are seeing younger people come into the workforce that just hustle and they know how to use these softwares and actually have massive gains on the business. And be able to, like, I know of some companies that have seen reps that are in their first 3 to 5 years of selling outproduce enterprise sellers that have been doing this for 20, 25 years at a multiple. Like not just like even, like 2 or 2.5x in some cases, because they are using these tools and these technologies. And that I think is part of the existential threat. And Jason, I'll make one comment because this has been bothering the hell out of me. Is I was at a conference last week and someone was on stage talking about AI and the 10x, salesperson. Like, is it possible? And actually broke it down from a math equation, which I thought was awesome. But he made a comment about like, oh, maybe AI is hype. And some woman in the crowd like was like cheering and yelling, like, it's so hype. And I remember looking to the person next to me and saying, that person's going to be out of a job in 2 years. You know what I mean? Like, you can't run from this type of technology because I think it's proven that it's here. Now, to your question, like, there are levels of depth that it can go to that some people that are building hands on, they're getting the output. But I think you have to understand what it's capable of and you have to lean in. I'm not building all these systems myself, right? I'm partnering with people in my business. I understand what we can do, how we can do it. I've been super curious and learning from people out there. Like I mentioned, Antonio, Jody Geiger over at Clue, like just talking to people and learning how they're doing things. And that anybody can do. Anybody can do that.
Well, and I would even extend what you said about that woman. You're going to be out of a job in 2 years. I think for a lot of companies that choose to be slow to innovate, and I think that the larger the company, the more resistance, the more
Yeah.
red tape there is to adoption.
Totally.
I think if companies, the idea that this is hype. This is like when I can't remember who he was a liberal writer, commentator, and he said in the 1990s that the internet was a hype. And there's no way that this isn't going to revolutionize every aspect of our lives in ways that we can't possibly understand. And if you're a business out there and you're not evolving, if you're not learning how to use these tools and implement, if you're not starting to strategically plan. I just had a conversation with Amos Bar Joseph, who has this concept, this belief that we really need to reevaluate every business system that we have about how it's going to interact, how the human AI collaboration is going to take hold.
Yep.
And I 100% agree with his idea and his view of where we're going. And so if you're a company out there and you're not doing this, you're going to die. You won't be able to compete. You can't compete.
And I think that's what's so interesting, right? And one item on that too is how we interact with software is really going to change. So someone that I've become really close with, his name is Brett Queener, and he's the managing director of Bonfire Ventures. Brett was, I believe, the original go-to-market leader at Salesforce when there was like 10 reps. He was the GM of all their products. He built most of that company on a product perspective, at least in the early days. And he has seen technology change. And he's been calling that UIs are going away or changing for the last 2 years. And at first I was like, oh, that's kind of interesting. And now how I'm seeing people interact with voice and how they're interacting with prompts and how instead of going to your CRM and going to the opportunity and going to the account, you just go to a chat interface and ask the question and get the answer. just how we interact with software is fundamentally changing. And that, I believe, is the biggest existential risk for a lot of these companies, is like, how do people consume your technology? Is it easy to use, right? And then you mix in the friction process, you mix in competitors, you mix in the ease of creating point solutions right now. And I think we're in for a wild ride over the next couple of years.
I had never. Do you agree with him that you think that UI is going away and that we're going to have, because we're such visual creatures, you know, the idea that I think maybe the way that we interact with the interface, but maybe I'm just being short-sighted. Going to a chat prompt for your CRM and just saying, hey, populate me this data. Sometimes it's easier to see it visually, but
Yeah, it might be, but you shouldn't have to click on 12 different tabs to get the answer, right?
yeah,
You know, you should be able to say, hey, I want to know about my conversation with Jason on this date and this opportunity, and it should be able just to pull it up. So you could still probably get the visual rendering, because I think you're right. A lot of us, I'm a visual learner, right? But I think just the way we interact with software, that's what he likes to talk about. It's like all these buttons, all these clicks, how long it takes us to get to places. With things like AI, you're able to get the answers. And now, even like with systems that I just showed you today, instead of going and searching, they're sent to you. So it's still visual, but the AI and the agents are going and augmenting the data. They're retrieving it and putting it right in front of you. And so think about, like, you know, how instant all of these things are, right? Like, you know, there's a gentleman by the name of Sean Whiteley at qualified.com that was on my event at Pre-Sales Collective in like 2021. And he said a quote that I have repeated probably thousands of times at this point. But he says that Amazon and Uber have changed the concept of speed and personalization for all of us, right? If Amazon, you ordered something on Amazon and it said it'd be there in 6 weeks, you would cancel. You call an Uber and said it'll be there in 2 hours, you'd cancel, right? And like those types of behaviors have been bleeding into B2B for the last now 4 years, if not 5 or 6. And so I think that our relationship with technology is just changing, and we're impatient and we want answers. And I think all of these trends are actually all kind of converging right now. And that's why we're in the situation that we're in.
So, okay, last question. Based on all of that we talked about today, I guess what advice would you give to business owners, sales leaders? I'll kind of let you pick, who have an aversion to adopting the technology, and where would you have them start? Like what sort of process is first?
Sure. Be curious is my advice, right? Like, you don't have to become a believer overnight. You don't have to become a disciple of like a product like Clay or Motion or Testbox overnight. You need to be curious. You need to go talk to other business leaders and go learn what they're doing, why they're doing it, and the impact it has had on their business. And so, you know, again, that's why I shout out Pavilion, because that's a great place for executives to go and talk to other peer executives, right? I was just, you know, at the CRO summit for Pavilion recently. They had a CMO summit last month. We hold roundtables every month. And there's just a great opportunity to get out there and learn. Because I think what's changed, Jason, is like 5 or 10 years ago, maybe 15 years ago, no one shared what they were doing, right? There was no best practice sharing because that was a secret, right? We all thought that we were doing something unique and you couldn't give your output. Now you go on LinkedIn and everyone's sharing every secret humanly possible, and you realize we're all doing a lot of the same things, right? It's all about execution. And so you just got to go be curious, and you just go learn. And again, the kind of the 3 word, you know, things that I mentioned, but most importantly, understand the impact, because that has what has blown my mind. Is I like to think I'm pretty innovative and ahead of the curve. When I start talking to people, I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm so far behind. And if I feel like I'm behind, I can't imagine where some people feel. And I think once you learn and you see the impact and you're like, wow, this is real, you just turn the corner, right? You just turn the corner.
No, I couldn't agree more. I think the amount of information sharing that we're doing now, I would just hope that more people inside of organizations, because again, I think a big fear is that, I'm going to get, if my boss finds out that what took me 2 hours is now taking me 2 minutes, that somebody's going to be upset with me. I just hope that business owners understand what's happening and really empower their teams to say, hey, if you're doing something cool, if you found a way to cut 30 hours a week or 30 hours a month off of your workload, share it with everybody so that we can all benefit from the technology and the improvement and the the competitive advantage. So at least for a little while, there's going to be this narrow window of disruption where a small handful of companies have the ability to create alpha competitive advantage inside their companies before products get built and now everybody's kind of operating at the same level again. There's a huge opportunity there.
Yeah, great call. Very well said, Jason.
Well, man, thanks, James. Where does everybody find you? How do they find Testbox if they're interested in checking it out?
Yeah, testbox.com is a great place to start. I actually have my own newsletter and interview series, testbox.com/GTM. Talk about a lot of these similar topics with experts. That's how I've learned, how I've leaned in. And I'm on LinkedIn a lot, like a lot of people, but I've been writing on LinkedIn since 2020. So things have changed a lot. I built my last business on LinkedIn. So check me out at linkedin.com/in/James Kaikis. Add me. Let's connect.
All right. Thanks, man. I appreciate you. Talk later.
Thanks for the time, Jason.
Yep. Bye. Well, all right, that's our show. Thank you so much for being here. Don't forget to like, subscribe, hit that bell icon so that you never miss an episode. And then if you want to, leave me a comment. Tell me what your thoughts are about AI and where we're going in the role of responsibilities that businesses and owners and employees have in order to push the technology forward. And then, hey, if anything that you heard in this episode got you excited about implementing AI, but you're one of those people who's a little on the fence and you just want a really easy solution that you can start implementing today, I want you to check out Motion. It's an incredible tool that covers project management, notes, team processes, and even AI agents now. It's a really awesome software that is going to help you dip your toe into the AI world without having to do a bunch of heavy coding and processing. Best part, there's a link in the description where you can trial it for free. So click that link, go check it out, get your trial started, and I'll talk to you soon.